There it is. It's going up. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Sustainiacs. I am Michael Vincent. I'm here every time you guys tune in, but I've got a new friend I'm making right now. Her name is Margaret O'Gorman, and she is a Sustainiac. She's been one longer than I have, probably, looking at her career, but she is currently CEO at Tandem Global. And you're also an author of Strategic Corporate Conservation Planning. Is that the name of the book?
That's correct. That is the
Right.
very, very long name of the book.
Yeah, it rolls right off the tongue. It's fantastic. It's interesting because I am 36 years in logistics, and now I'm like totally into sustainability and plastics recycling and all this other kind of thing, obviously. And when I see Tandem Global, it's like, huh, I wonder if is that a logistics company? What is because you always talk about tandem axles and that type of stuff. It's totally different thing. Not even similar. Margaret, how are you doing today?
I am doing very well. Thank you very much for inviting me on your podcast. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, well, I think we had a link that said, "Hey, you got to talk to Margaret," right?
Yes, yeah, Laura
What-
Aziela up in Michigan.
she is fantastic. She has introduced me to so many fantastic people that are involved in sustainability, and
Hmm.
the looking at your background and the short time that we've been speaking, I can see that this is another fantastic. She must be. I think you determine the quality of yourself by the quality of people or company you keep, and she certainly keeps really high quality company. Um,
She
and I mean
does, and
that sincerely.
she's a very generous connector. I love her. I love that about her. She really knows how to connect people.
Well, yeah, no, she's fantastic. So, explain to the people let's we're going to dig into everything. You'll have no secrets that haven't been overturned in this podcast. But for what is Tandem Global? Tandem Global, for everybody, I got a lot of people in logistics that follow me just because 36-year career in logistics. This is not tandem axles or anything like that. What is
No,
Tandem Global? I've been looking at the website, which I absolutely think is fantastic. Um, yeah, let's dig in. So what is Tandem
sure.
Global doing there?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So the Tandem Global is about business and nature working together.
Yep.
Our tagline is "Together leads to better," and it's really an understanding of how business needs to and can play a role to bring us through the current environmental issues that we have, from climate change to biodiversity loss to water scarcity and quality issues, and helping companies through our know-how to find those roads through these issues and to bring benefit to society and the environment with their work.
I think it's fantastic, and I 100% agree with the premise. That's why I started this podcast was hearing people talk about how um, you you're either making money or you're being sustainable. Like it's this not only an intelligence and time suck, but it can really ruin the bottom line of the company, and that's not true at all, right? I
Correct.
mean, that's not even close. I contend that it's really like business 101. If we were doing it right from the beginning, we wouldn't be here.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a big, um, I won't say schism, but a difference of opinion between kind of Milton Friedman, the economist, way back when, who said a company's only responsibility was to its shareholders, and that has evolved over many years to companies understanding that they are actually a part of society and that their responsibility is not only to their shareholders but also to the communities that they're operating in and to the global both economy environment as a whole. So there has been a generational shift really in how leaders are thinking about the companies. And I think right now, I mean, you said you've come to sustainability relatively recently. We're probably on a third generation of sustainability leaders right now, like
Yeah.
true sustainability leaders in companies. And so it's almost now embedded, like for me, the company I started with that merged with another organization to create Tandem Global, Wildlife Habitat Council, that's been around since 1989. And it was in the EHS function of company. So environmental health and safety, very much looking at the land, but it has evolved over the years to now also sit in the ESG function, the environment, social, and governance. And I think that really shows that how it has become operationalized, how these issues, sustainability issues, have really become a part of doing business
Yeah,
for companies.
they have. I mean, what you just said there in that very short time is like 7 days worth of talks and discussions, right? It really is. I mean, when you invoke, the shareholder supremacy or primacy, I should say, of Milton Friedman to now we can talk for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of the impacts of that and the different types. I had a great podcast with Stuart L. Hart, um, introduced to me by our mutual friend Laura, and it was all about, he wrote a book, The End of Shareholder Primacy, right? And
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
virtuous capitalism, conscious capitalism, and that type of stuff, which is what you're talking about, right? Um,
Yes.
which is something that a lot of very notable and astute economists and business professors throughout the years have and authors have talked about. From the likes of Alfred North Whitehead. Society's only as great as the contributions from business, right? It's men
Mm-hmm.
and women of business. That's scaled down as a much longer quote, but he's right, and I contend that is right, and business should contribute something to the society greater than just wealth for the sake of wealth, because then it becomes
Mm-hmm.
extractive, right? It becomes extractive, and then you worsen the haves and have nots, right? When you start doing that. um,
Yeah.
it's interesting, very, very interesting. Now you mentioned EHS, and I remember EHS, but the E in EHS was try not to get sued.
Yes, yes, yes,
Right?
and that still exists. That is still a that's still a
It
driver.
absolutely does. It absolutely does. It absolutely does. But it wasn't like this virtuous thing, right? The E in there
No, no,
at
and
the
and
time.
and that and that is and I mean that is how Wildlife Habitat Council, one half of this merger, started, was the companies, land-based companies, understanding that they could use their land for better. So because it was in EHS, it used to be, whoops, we did something wrong. How can we use nature to either um, repair things or to give back, or else it was, we have a spare 40 acres, how can we manage it better for nature, for our employees? And that was the beginning of it all, which was a very simple way of understanding that us as companies, they have companies, had land, and what they did on the land had impact. So starting from that premise, you just build and you build and you build and you build, and now you have companies understanding and having biodiversity and nature strategies for their entire operations. So going from EHS to really thinking in a strategic and integrated way, it takes a long time. But when it gets there, it becomes embedded in the DNA of a company. Like, for example, waste management. All waste management landfills, they manage where possible for nature and biodiversity. And it's like it's a no-brainer for waste management because they've been doing it for 30 years and
It's their
they
job. I mean, it's
understand.
their job, right? I mean, it's the premise of the
Yeah,
company. Yeah.
exactly. And because of that, then they secure their social license to operate, which is really important for companies who are in communities, that they can secure that social license to operate, and they do it through a variety of different means. But being a good member of the community is a big one for a lot of these companies.
No, it certainly is, and it's interesting how it has evolved over the years from that EHS to the
Yes.
ESG, and how it's viewed. It's the almost the demonization that we've seemingly have gone through. I would think, except for in particular right now, which is a lot of misconception of some of the things that are happening most recently in our society. Um, kind of the fight between capitalism and sustainability, right? That is at least
Hmm.
perceived out there. right now, right?
Yeah.
Um, and some of it is real, but some of it is getting caught up in. Yeah, I was just having the discussion today about a few grants that were out there, um, and just looking at those grants that I know that were out there, half of it was fluff.
Hmm.
It really was. I mean, I mean, we can't act like all of us, everybody's innocent in what is happening, and I don't want to get into the politics of it, but it is the interesting change of dynamics from, if you remember Love Canal
Hmm.
in Buffalo to now where it is Hershey's and other companies investing millions of dollars and in some cases billions into their supply chain
Yep.
upstream into the farming communities, et cetera, to make it more sustainable in more than just an environmental way, right? In
Absolutely,
society.
absolutely. Yeah, because at bottom, at base for all of this, it's a risk. It's so companies assessing their risks and understanding and managing their risks and alleviating their risks, taking a sustainability trajectory, taking a sustainability approach is a risk issue. So
Uh,
when companies are looking upstream, looking into their farmers, looking, for example, whether cocoa farms and others are at risk of climate change, because as climate changes, are we going to be able to grow coffee here? Are we grow cocoa here? How do we develop that, and how do
right.
we provide for the farmers so that they are resilient enough to be able to either change their practices or change what they're growing? So it's really, for a lot of companies, it is risk. And for many companies, it's also opportunity. So being an opportunity, there is tons of economic opportunity tied up in sustainability innovation
Mm,
as
yeah,
companies
huge.
innovate into more cost efficient, energy efficient, water efficient. First of all, you're saving costs, and then new products, you're going to be selling more good stuff. So it's so integrated into business. I get very frustrated when people put sustainability over there, because it really is about risk and opportunity for the private sector.
It really is, and when you look at different things, and I love that you said when they put it over here, and that's the purpose of what I'm trying to do and evangelize as well. And what you're doing is it isn't over here. It's together. It's within the
Hmm.
business, and there are certain people out there that are that on both sides um, that are thinking that they're pushing the agenda forward, and they actually hurt it by being too extreme.
Hmm.
if you know what I mean, classifying these people as demonic wealth extractors only, or these people as nut job tree huggers, right? And chaining themselves to bulldozers and that type of stuff, right? When you have to understand, no, it works all together. Because I agree with you, the blue ocean of opportunity is unbelievable if you
Hmm.
embrace it and you look at it that way instead of fighting it. It's almost like the disruption of technology that we went through in the 20 teens, where this disruption was like the biggest buzzword that was out there, right? And it was
Hmm.
disrupt or be disrupted, right? We're kind of in that area where if you embrace it, my goodness, you can do some really good things environmentally, societally, and
Hmm.
build a tremendous market share in business, right? That is virtuous.
Yes, yes, you can absolutely do that. Now, as somebody who's been called a nut job tree hugger in my life,
You were
I
exactly
I have.
those terms.
Yes, well, not
and,
maybe not the
and
nut
proudly
job,
proudly so.
but certainly I've been called a tree hugger in my life. You know, I understand the need for the left and the right flanks, because
Sure.
those voices out there are the loud voices that are pushing
Yeah,
faster than the world by itself.
that's
So to
true.
me, I always get it. I spoke with somebody one time. She was working in human rights, and she said the human rights, to drive the human rights agenda, you need people at the loud ends of that. So I
Mm,
get that, but the change does happen in the middle. The change does happen where people from both sides of those flanks are coming together to work. So me, as somebody who's got an environmental background, working with the corporate sector, that's a great conversation to have, because I feel I'm representing Mother Nature in these discussions, but putting Mother Nature into the language that business can understand. And I think that that's what makes the difference, instead of hammering it over the head by you shall not cut down
Yeah.
another tree for your entire life or I'm going to hate you forever. That doesn't work. But actually saying, well, this is an important component that you should think about as you're moving through with these strategies, that helps a lot. Just framing it in the right context for business and the right language for business.
Yeah, because when you get into ES and G, and we're talking mostly environmental here, but environmental is so intertwined with social.
Oh yeah,
I don't know how you separate them really, because
yeah,
you understand what I'm saying. I mean, the haves and have-nots and quality of life depend certainly on our regard and stewardship, proper stewardship of the environment, right?
absolutely.
What you mean by speaking in terms of business is that, I mean, no matter what your business is, doesn't matter what it is, that nature, whether it's society or environment, because they're both nature, is I mean, that's your raw materials. That's your source.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
if
I
you're
mean,
not
it's,
responsible with it, I mean, what do it's ridiculous.
yeah,
You wouldn't, you need to make sure that supply is still there, right? You don't extract and move on. This isn't War of the Worlds,
that's
right?
right. I mean, somebody I work with in a group called Business for Nature, they said there's no business on a dead planet. You cannot do business if you don't have clean water, clean air, and resources, because everything that is manufactured is either taken out of the ground, grown, it somehow comes from the planet. So
Somehow extracted,
thinking,
yeah.
everything in this, nothing just comes out of nothing. So really thinking about that in terms of, we need to have a healthy planet to have a healthy economy, and we need to have a healthy planet to have a healthy society. You're right, it's all joined. And that's one of the things that we love to do at Tandem Global, is to connect business, environment, and society together, because we really believe that those things work in tandem, towards really good. But society is such an important part of it. It really, really is.
It's huge, and when you look at it, I wonder how does the discussion when you're consulting with these companies and working with these companies, does how philosophical does it get? Because I can see that it can get really, really deep in some of those discussions, right? I mean, and I mean, everybody's got a heart theoretically. There may be a few that are doubtful. Okay, but I don't know them personally. I just have my suspicions. But when you start talking about it, we're really sitting on the precipice of correcting a lot of the have and have not issues around the world, are we
Hmm.
not? With
Yes.
these opportunities, and are there discussions at that highest level, which I assume you're in those meetings in those boardrooms? Uh, does that come up? Does that speak to it? Because there are companies like Dow, right?
Hmm.
The evil chemical Dow, that have spoken about the bottom of the pyramid for
Hmm.
decades.
Yeah.
And Laura will
Yeah.
tell you that. Our good
Hmm.
friend Laura will talk about that extensively, right?
Yeah.
Is that
Yeah.
still a discussion today? Is that a view as you look at, even if you look at society and have nots as your resources and dehumanize it? Is that not something that is there, or does it not
Hmm.
get quite that deep?
Yeah, it's a really interesting observation that most people have hearts, and I will say most people, 95%, I'd say. But when I'm talking to chief sustainability officers, talking to chief financial officers, even the odd CEO that I get a chance to talk to, that heart is definitely there. And it's such an interesting conversation, because when you break that evil corporation, so-called evil corporation, down into its parts, and its parts are people,
Yeah.
all of those people want to do the right thing. I have yet to sit in a room, and maybe it's just observer bias because I'm in the rooms where people are talking about this, but
Mm.
I have yet to sit in a room where somebody is going, we need to rape and pillage the environment to make our bottom line better.
Well,
Literally.
that's it. That's encouraging.
Yeah. And what I think what people are really trying to do in a very authentic way is figure out the ways that work through it. It's very easy to stand on the outside and say to a Dow or a DuPont or an Exxon, to say, don't stop doing what you're doing forever. That's very easy to do, and that would have incredible impacts on,
Negative impacts, big
negative
negative impacts.
impacts on, like the phones that we carry every day contain the chemicals and the copper that these people are creating and extracting. So just the impacts. So finding those complex paths through these very complex organizations that are connecting CSOs who are speaking to CEOs and board members, connecting those to the people on the ground who are making the products or extracting the products, and then connecting, as you know, out into the supply chain. So how do we do this? There's disruption, and then there's disruption with a capital D. So I think most people
Yeah.
are really trying to find authentically a way through this. And you're right, Dow has been there for decades talking
Mm.
about this. We
Yeah.
work with one of the biggest copper mining companies, Freeport-McMoRan, who's got copper mines all over the world. Copper is essential to the energy transition. They've
And
been
it's not in
talking
a
about
great
this.
abundance according to what we're going to need to extract over the next
Yeah,
years, according to
yeah. So we
right.
need to figure out
It's
ways
becoming a
to
rare earth
recycle
mineral
this.
almost in some
It
cases, right?
it is, and for decades, again, they have been talking about the communities that they're working in. They've got great experiences working with those communities, working with the environment. So you can look at the corporate sector and go evil, but then as you dig in and get to know them and get to know what they're trying to do, and also get to know the obstacles, like the constant
Mm.
obstacles of we laugh inside here at Tandem Global that a company that's decentralized will 12 months from now, oh, we're centralizing all our functions. Then they're centralized 12 months from now, oh, we're decentralizing now. So this continual management overhaul just drives us
Yeah.
crazy. And
The
then, of course, we
tide
have to
comes
protect
in, the
them.
tide goes
Oh,
out.
yeah.
Hey, guess what? It's
So
winter again.
that's right. Okay, we're decentralizing.
I love. Well, some people need to have, they need to justify their positions, I guess, in some ways, right? The new person comes in, they want to stamp their on it. It's there's so much to dig into when you start talking about these things, and we talk about uh, there's slippery slopes in our demands. I contend that we as consumers, and probably more the financial institutions across the world, that were the financial institution globally, has created this unethical, depersonalized entities called the corporation that we call evil,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's not the people inside it. It's demand and how we've really just screwed up our financial system to say that, growth and profit is the only story that matters if you're a valuable company, right?
Mm-hmm.
That kind of
Mm-hmm.
narrative has kind of created that, don't you? I mean, do you see that? Is that a talk that or a discussion that's out there?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is a very that whole focus again on shareholder value, that is the only value, even though it has gotten less important, but it's
Hmm.
still what does drive a lot of companies because of the quarterly earnings calls, because of all the things they have to go through. It's really difficult to make investments for the long term that are not immediately returning into a company. So this is, and as as I've read and learned in the past, shareholder capitalism is not something that is mandated by any
Right.
sort of a
Yeah.
capitalist society.
Right.
Shareholder capitalism is the one that we have chosen to adopt in this country and much of the Western world.
Right.
So, how do we kind of move beyond that and think, okay, we can have capitalism, but it doesn't need to be this short term shareholder capitalism. It could be a different type of capitalism that gives returns in different ways. So
Yeah.
one of the things that we do see from that structure is the short-termism, is these quarterly earnings calls, is this very much knee-jerk reaction to short-term financial reporting. But we do see in the financial sector a pressure coming from the financial sector, many groups that are coming together, big investment firms and others, saying to companies, let's move beyond this, let's try and think of a different way of doing business. So Ceres, CERES, one of the large NGOs in this country, really focused on investments, ethical investments, are helping the financial world to think beyond that short-term shareholder capitalism model
Mm.
and move into a model where they can actually use their power to help companies to develop more sustainability approaches.
Gotcha. Along the vein of speaking in terms of what you're talking about is this different sort of story to value, right? Is what it is, right? It's a different story to determine value, kind of, right? It's a different focus on what the value is for that shareholder, from short term to longer term ESG, environmental sustainability, et cetera. In terms of speaking to a company to promote that in more of a business way, is it also fair to say that switching really from this, I think like 80% or better of value is by corporations, public, is created through buyback of stock now.
Hmm.
The companies
Yes.
focus on, instead of R&D.
Yeah.
And if it were R&D, if it were reversed, will we not be in a better place, or at least have a much better chance of succeeding faster
Hmm.
if that were flipped, if that narrative were flipped?
Yeah, and there's so many of those narratives that can be flipped around the way that companies are structured. So yeah, Andy Hoffman is a professor at the University of Michigan, and he talks a lot about shareholder capitalism and how to flip that narrative, you need generations of new business leaders who can come in and think differently about what it
Yeah.
means to be a business leader. But the other flip that we have is an author called Andrew Winston, and he talks about how we are asking, our companies are investing millions and millions
Hmm.
and millions, billions of dollars in AI with no certain return on investment. We don't know what
Right.
the use case for AI is apart from, I don't
It's
know, making up.
blockchain point two is what 2.0 is what I call it.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing I've seen is, artwork that making up artwork or so. I don't know.
Hmm.
So companies are like investing billions in AI without a return on investment, without a use case. But then they're asking sustainability functions to prove their worth within a company. And
Yeah.
it's like, imagine if that was flipped. Imagine if you had to prove the use case for AI first, and then, but just invest billions in sustainability functions, in sustainability engineering, in innovation, and all of these things that could happen. That's another narrative that could be flipped quite easily in terms of really getting that business
Well,
model to change.
isn't that because it's the view of sustainability is still like this heartstring tug, and not that real actual resources and minerals, etc.?
Absolutely, that's exactly what it is. And I was recently at Greenbiz, the big sustainability conference out in Arizona, and I was with Kevin Butt, who works for Toyota and Toyota North America. And he talked about actually they created a center, a revenue center within their office of the savings and the income that they got from their sustainability innovations. And he
Wow.
was like, this is cool. This is how we should be able to do it, because sustainability is not heartstrings and Bobby dogs. It's actual business risk and business opportunity.
It really is, but that's I mean that's a fairly recent development though, right? Or as far as exposure to the rest of the world is, right? Because the face has been, I'm going to say it again, the nut job tree hugger. I mean, because that was the popular
Yeah, no, you're
narrative,
right.
right?
You're right. That
It,
was the
it, it
popular
was. I mean, I'm
narrative.
just being honest, right? I mean, that's what it was. I mean, I grew up with the video of the Indian standing on the side of the road with the tears coming down, and somebody throws garbage at his feet, right? I mean, it was that's kind of the narrative that is perpetuated, right? And then the voices that have the money that can talk, that can hold these speaks and get in front of people and evangelize are, this is going to destroy your wealth if you do this. You can't do
Hmm.
both, which isn't,
Hmm.
and none of that's true. But that's been the narrative that has been pounded in people's brains, right?
Yes, yes, you're right. I mean, the kind of the fact that environmentalism was seen to be a choice rather than a necessity,
Yeah,
because we
not
really do need.
rather than a business necessity, which it really
Yeah,
is. It's a business
yeah,
basic,
yes, yes.
is what it is, right?
Yeah, absolutely it is. And I think, sustainability as a profession, as a line of business, has matured over the last
Right.
three
Right.
generations of chief sustainability officers. It's gotten
Sure.
tougher too, because there is more oversight in what companies are saying that they're doing and what companies are doing. So back in the day, a company could
Yeah.
make a commitment and they'd get all, woohoo, this is a great company. But now there's much more sophistication in the market, and companies have to be more careful about what they're saying they're doing, more careful about what they're doing, and more careful also, and I think we're going to see this in the next 5 to 10 years, is understanding the trade-offs, because that's a big part of the problem. Is if you decide to make an investment in a solar field, what is your trade-off on biodiversity? Or if you decide to do X, what's your trade-off and Y? So it's
Mm.
becoming, I'd love to have been there in the glory days of sustainability, where you could make a big claim and, work towards that. But now there's a lot more attention being paid. There's a lot more frameworks that people have to contribute to. There's just a lot more scrutiny on what companies are talking about.
So it's more difficult, and there's a few more landmines, right? But do you see that as necessarily a negative or a positive? Because I could make an argument both ways, and I'm
Yeah,
sure you
yeah.
could too, right? But and I know you could easily argue the opposite of what you believe. You're very intelligent, and so could I. But which do you lean towards? Is it one of these things that could be a positive because of that attention, but could also be used as a negative?
Mm,
In other words, Watchdog suing people for greenwashing, when all the company really did was maybe overstate what they were doing because of some marketing and that type of thing, but it wasn't necessarily a nefarious thing. And maybe they reached half their goal instead of 100% of the goal, and they got slapped
yeah.
with a lawsuit. So now they're just not going to do it unless they're forced to legally, right? I could see both ways.
Yeah, I
I don't know
mean,
where you're.
I'm like you. I can see both sides. I feel, perfection is an unnecessary goal at the moment. We just need
Right.
we need motion more than perfection, and I would prefer to see companies moving towards that goal rather than being hammered for getting halfway. I
Yeah.
feel, and I've said this a lot. I think that greenwashing has been over weaponized to such an extent that companies are afraid to talk about anything. Not everything needs to be data in an Excel spreadsheet. Companies should be able to tell the stories about what they're doing without having accusations of greenwashing. And
Yeah.
I think that the world of policing greenwashing is full of very, very well intentioned people who may not necessarily understand what they're reading. So if a company is telling a story, they're not claiming to be the greenest company in the world. They're telling the story about something that they're doing, yes, to enhance their reputation, but they're not making claims around it. Now, when they are making claims, let's call it out. But I feel like there's a lot. Like recently, some thought leader with a large following on LinkedIn decided that FedEx was pulling back from its climate goals because
Yeah.
they mentioned it in their SEC risk assessment. They said not reaching our climate goals is a risk. They never said we're not reaching our climate goals. We're not going. They literally said it's a risk. Yes, absolutely, 100% FedEx. It is a risk. They were being honest, but that knowledge was misinterpreted by somebody who calls themselves a thought leader on LinkedIn, and then it suddenly became FedEx is walking back from their climate goals. So
Yeah.
we
Yeah. Yeah.
really need to understand what
They
companies
did
are
the same thing
saying.
with Old Dominion in the same, not to stay in the same space. It was the same thing with Old Dominion. There was a it was several months back where it just said, during their board meetings, etc., the board walked back from all their and denies their climate goals and their GHG emissions goals and stuff like that. And that wasn't it at all. It's not what
Yeah.
they said at all. It was just along the exact same lines as you're talking about with the FedEx piece, which I remember as well, quite clearly.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I don't know that they misinterpreted it so much as they used it as clickbait to get people to watch.
Yeah. I was being polite.
I think you were. I think it was a little bit more nefarious than just a mistaken interpretation, in my opinion, not yours. That's my opinion. I'll claim that one. I don't care. I'll call BS when I see it, and I don't care. One of the interesting things that I wanted to ask you, that you had mentioned earlier, and I'm trying to keep mental notes, and I'm not that smart to be able to do that, but but I try. Is you've as you work with the companies, right? There's two different sides to the sustainability, um, and maybe there's not. Maybe in my mind there aren't. I'm wrong. So I just want to put forth this thought and see what you think about it. You have the companies that are trying to be more sustainable or more circular in their materials, right? And get rid of this. There's people out there like Sarah Samuelson who say, though, there is no end life. We have to get rid of end of life. That's a thing that gives us an excuse. It's reclaiming resources is what we're doing. Not what do you do it? Change some of the verbiage to help things out. But you got kind of that type of thing, and being more virtuous in your capitalism or whatever term you want to put in there that shows the positive impacts on society and environment. But then you also have the blue ocean of new technology that's coming out, right? So instead of maybe being more resource conscious on the cocoa farmers, we can now literally build a Bitcoin mining operation in Nova Scotia that is hooked up to a greenhouse that has several square miles made out of clear solar panels that are sprayed with a varnish that boosts it by 20% using agrivoltaics and also precision irrigation models within it, right? And all these and be just growing there instead and avoiding the environmental issue and just using technology to kind of thwart the disastrous economic or environmental problems that we're causing, right? How, you're smiling because maybe I'm crazy, or you're smiling because I've hit on something that you're going, yeah, that's an issue. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that, right? I mean, that's this kind of thing that in my head over the last couple months has been going, CNC factory, things that make you go,
Yeah. Yes, I mean it's really, I mean it's an interesting thought. Can we science our way out of
Well,
this?
I
Can
mean, and what's
we?
the struggle? Is there a struggle between that sciencing our way out of it, or being more responsible what we already have, or
Yeah.
does it have to be a combination in which one wins?
I mean, I think there has to be a combination, but if we think about it, right? If you think about the system, the Earth system that was an absolute perfectly imbalanced system
Yeah,
before we got into it,
yeah,
and continued to be for a long time. And if you think about how that system fits together, it's just so elegant and it's so simple in so many ways. I mean, there's a lot of complexity, of course, when we get down to molecular biology and other things, but it's a
sure.
really simple system of balance. And um, last year, I was at the Biodiversity COP in Colombia, and Dr. Susan Mohammed was the president of it. And she gave this wonderful speech, and she said, "You've never seen a spider use more web than it needs to build, to build its web, use more things." And she talked about that. She's, how the system itself is so in balance that we can actually learn from it. We're the only species on the planet who has more than we need. No other species is like that. So when we take that out, when we leave that nature-based thinking behind and put it all in a greenhouse in Nova Scotia, that really divorces ourselves from what the problem is overall, which is a planet that is not in balance.
Right.
And I think we should, it's a very human-centered problem, because that greenhouse in Nova Scotia will not have biodiversity in it, will be diverting water from other types of activities. With spraying on those photovoltaics, that's a chemical that's going to come from somewhere.
That's
So
right.
all of these sorts of things seem very attractive and very sci-fi, but really what we need to do is to step back into balance. And it sounds simple, and it could be simple, but because again, there's this shareholder capitalism put on top of it, that makes it a bit more difficult. But there are ways to do it. And I think that's what good chief sustainability officers and companies are doing, are thinking through how do we bring that balance back. So, so the human population and the non-human population can actually work in balance together.
Yeah, it's just some of that opportunity, and that's what I mean when there's. I talk to people about slippery slopes all the time, and some of them people look at me glassy eyed, and some go, "Yeah, I get it," and some people think of, I don't know what they think of when I talk about it, but there are slippery slopes all along that we need to look at, and some will champion and cheer those innovations, while others like myself go, If there's too many people cheering it, there's something wrong. Somebody's not thinking about this correctly, right? Because that what we just talked about, it promote if you take it one way, it promotes extract and move on, which is not what we can do. That's not
Hmm.
balanced. That's not
Hmm.
balanced at all. But we're in danger of that in some because of some very smart and very um, altruistic intentions. Really, in science, when we look at things, how many things have we developed as a human race that were well intentioned that we turned out to go crap. We probably shouldn't have done that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a group right now spending millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars trying to recreate an animal that's extinct, and I can't remember what it is, a mammoth, I think.
Oh boy.
I would take those millions of dollars from that group and create uplift for biodiversity much easier. If they would just, give me the money, I would direct it into a place that would have a better outcome for the planet. But instead, it's this cute idea that's got a lot of people excited, and they're going to bring back mammoths. Why are they bringing back mammoths? I have no idea. But please give it to me, and I will, secure the permanent preservation of high biodiversity value lands or good watersheds that support communities. But please, but we get so excited about these shiny objects that we think about, and it's
That's
just
it.
crazy.
Yeah, it is. And the ignorant that well, I have to say this because we're kind of on this topic of misplaced funds and shiny objects. I was just reading how about Gates. Gates still wants to spend billions studying cow flatulence and how to because it's this huge methane issue. What he doesn't understand that it's the burps that are the issue. It is literally not the flatulence; it's the cow burps that are the big issues. And it just makes me laugh when I see things like that. I'm like, no, that's not what is causing the methane. That's
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
completely
I
off
think
base.
I think as a society we study things to death,
Mm,
and we spend more time, and I probably get hammered by researchers for this. But one of my favorite environmentalists was a woman called Wangari Maathai. She won a Nobel Prize for her work in Kenya planting
mm,
trees.
mm.
And she had a quote. She said, "It doesn't take a diploma to plant a tree." And I love that because it really lays bare the simplicity of the work that we need to do. If you walk out your door today, you know how to improve your environment. You know how to get like a good ecosystem going. You know how that works. And it's so interesting. I think we as humanity have a tendency to overcomplicate, overstudy, and really come up with technocratic solutions to something that the earth has already shown us solutions to. Now I'm sounding like a nut job tree hugger, but that's the
No, no,
science. The
no,
science is
no.
there,
No. You. Well, I think I don't think you are. I think you're speaking very sound logic. Is we've lost our Occam's razor, basically.
Yeah, that is very true. We have, yeah. I mean, Occam's razor is
Yeah,
perfect. It really is.
yeah. It really is, and I think that's the issue. And I think that's where the scientists would go. Oh yeah, you're right. I mean, we're you know we're looking for the shiny way to do this when there's just an obvious way. Put the seed in the ground. Boom. It
Yeah,
works, right? But then there's
absolutely.
yeah, we get too excited about that stuff. So let me ask you: were you born a tree hugger, or was it a product of your environment? Where I find it very interesting that the majority of the people that I speak to that are driven by the business end and the social environmental impacts of sustainability, right? All of it tend to not be from the United States. They just don't. Because I think growing up here, you're certainly exposed to the fact that hey, it doesn't matter. You're going to get a new one tomorrow anyway, right? It's kind of
Hmm.
like this spoiled thing, and there's just miles and miles. I mean, you'd still drive across West Texas for hours and not see a building, right?
Yeah.
And people see that as this false kind of security blanket, right?
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
did you what was there a trigger that said, "Oh," or did you just made this way?
I don't know. I mean, but it's a really good observation. When I first moved to this country, I moved to this country in 2000, and I was shocked that a water heater in a house heated water all day, every day. I just couldn't believe that this was a use of energy. Where I come from in Ireland, we have something called the immersion. And the immersion gets put on to heat the water in the morning so people can bathe in the morning, and in the evening, to do the washing up or whatever. And it's a very famous meme for Irish mummies to be like, turn the immersion off because you're wasting energy. When I came to
Oh,
this when I came to this country and was like, oh my God, you heat water all day, every day, just don't tell my mother, please. Um, so, so there, I think coming from somewhere else does allow you to have a perspective to ask questions. Do your parking spaces really need to be this big, or can't you just learn how to park properly? Do you need 15 types of bread in the supermarket? So I do think it provides that perspective of asking questions because things are done differently elsewhere.
yeah,
I've always had kind of a love of the natural world and an appreciation of that. But I found my place. I think, I could never sit in a old growth pine tree and tie myself, in front of bulldozers. I'm not a lobbyist that could go on Capitol Hill and do lobbying because I've no patience. So I found my place, which is at that intersection of nature and business, and we've thrived there as an organization. So I think I found my right place. But constantly questioning, having that outsider perspective, I think does make a difference. It doesn't have to be like this.
yeah, yeah. The fresh set of eyes, taking the horse blinders off, so to speak, and not being immersed in it. You're also an author, so we forgot to mention that you're CEO of Tandem, but you're also an author. The
Hmm.
Strategic Corporate Conservation Planning. Is it a
Planning.
text or is it a fiction novel?
No, I'll write
Is it
my
a
fiction
sci-fi?
novel.
Is it a sci-fi thriller? What do we got?
Oh, I wish it was, and then get optioned by Amazon, and I'd be well set. No, it's really what I wrote it for two audiences. I wrote it for the nonprofit, the NGO audience of environmentalists who see companies as nothing other than a blank checkbook, because I want NGOs to be able to work with companies like we do. Like, we can't work with every company. We work with about 100, mostly Fortune 500 companies. But
Hmm.
if more environmental NGOs could see companies as, that they have a common goal in making their communities better, that conversation changes from give me a check and I'll go away with it to how can we work together. So it was from that point of view. And then from the company point of view, don't be afraid of these not job tree huggers out there, because they're trying to get something done too. So here's how to work. So really trying to bring two communities that don't understand each other in a pragmatic way of, like, if we take these steps to improve the nature, improve the biodiversity, improve our community, because you're in my community, here's how we can do it together. So that's really the reason that I wrote the book. It was published by Island Press, that is one of the premier kind of environmental publishers in the country, and
Yeah,
I was thrilled to work with them. But yeah, that's the impetus behind it at the time.
excellent, excellent, and it's available. You can just look it up.
Yeah, where all good books are sold.
Where all good books are sold, or just you can visit Margaret O'Gorman on LinkedIn
I am on LinkedIn, yes,
and
and
all that stuff.
tandemglobal.org is our website.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Do you think that the I mean, how do from the corporate side of things, right? We talked about, like, Dow's been doing things for, and many have been doing things for years and years, that people don't know of. They think that these, uh, how do they tell their story better, right? How's that there? It's you get these things, like, I saw that my relative of mine had this candy bar, and they were just like, oh, look, see, you got to buy this candy here because they support the cocoa farmers, and they do this, and they do that, and it's 100% ethically sourced and all this other kind of stuff. And then, but when you go on that website and you look down and you read through the story, it is absolutely no different than Hershey. It isn't.
Mm-hmm.
They even stand there. We
Mm-hmm.
cannot guarantee that there wasn't child labor in this, although we make efforts to do this, and this. Exact same statements as you get from Hershey's, but this one, the latest generation thinks that's the one you got to buy because they're the only ones doing anything. When the others, is it the fear of greenwashing, or they just suck at telling their own story?
I think it's mostly. I do think it's mostly that they are not good at telling their own stories. So I have not yet met a company that has said to me, "I'm very happy how I'm telling my sustainability story." There's not a
Yeah.
single company out there that is happy at how they're doing it. They are walking a fine line between being accused of greenwashing and in some term greenwashing. So they're really trying to figure out the right way to say it. And yes, all of these startup companies and small companies are very, very good at positioning themselves and probably are very good in their sustainability journeys. But it's easier when you're a startup to kind of make that as a foundation. Whereas these legacy companies like a Hershey,
Yeah.
like a General Motors, have to kind of bring it back into years and years and years, sometimes hundreds of years of a company legacy. And how do you change that? So I remember we worked one time with a spin-off company from one of these legacy companies, and they needed to become innovative. And they said, we're struggling with that because our entire DNA was about risk aversion and safety. And now
Mm.
we're asking people who have worked with us for 30 years to become risk takers and innovators. So when you think about a corporate
Mm.
culture and how you're shifting it from one way to the next, it's really, really challenging. But I think companies need to continue to tell their stories. It's one of the things that we do is help companies tell their stories by being a credible third party for them. We have, a certification, a recognition program that recognizes their conservation activity, which is a third party recognition that allows them to say, for example, Waste Management, General Motors, Toyota, and others, we are doing this conservation work. We are creating this positive impact for nature at this particular place. And that then allows them to tell the story of that. And sometimes they engage the community with it, sometimes they're using it for education, a variety of things, but then helping them tell that story. So yeah, there's no company that's good at it, and many companies are pretty bad.
When you get into that situation, when a company comes and I know they don't just knock on, maybe they do. They knock on the door and go, "Hey, is Margaret home? We need to talk to her." And they're trying to make that transformation. Do they come to you with that knowledge, going, "Hey, our legacy has been this, and we need to change this," or is it something that's discovered? Talk about that. Can you? I don't know if you got more time to keep talking or not, but
I'm
I,
just checking my
I've
calendar.
got millions of questions. We can talk about we can have a follow up podcast, but
Yeah, yeah. I actually have. I wouldn't normally, but it's a board member, and I can't blow a board member off, so I have to.
oh come on,
I
they're
have a
not that
hard stop at
important.
noon. Yeah, this one is
They're
so.
I gotcha. All right, look, hey everybody, you'll have to come back next time for the question I'm about to ask Margaret next. But I really appreciate everybody coming on. And Margaret, I love it. I love what you guys are doing. I love your website, and I love the fact that I scrolled all the way down and then I had a good laugh because it's great advice. Um, but it was presented to me. It just hit me as kind of this dry kind of uh, British humor of how do you avoid greenwashing at the end, and I think it's fantastic. Don't make false claims. Don't lie through omission, and don't just lie. That's basically what it says. I think it's fantastic. It's great advice. It's great advice. It's
Yes,
great advice.
sometimes you have to state the obvious.
Sometimes you absolutely have to hit somebody with the obvious brick. You absolutely do. You
Yes.
absolutely do. Hey, everybody, this has been the Sustainiacs. Yeah, that's who we are. Thank you, all, everybody, for downloading, watching, listening, whatever you're doing there. And Margaret, it's been fantastic. I really mean it. I've got a million more questions if you're willing to come on and do part two. That'd be fantastic.
Certainly am. You know where I am. So please reach
Uh,
out. It's been a real joy for me too. I've really enjoyed this conversation.
Awesome. I appreciate that very much, Margaret. You have a wonderful day, and everybody, hey, peace and love.